I remember the moment everything went silent. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence between heartbeats, the space where life holds its breath. In that stillness, I heard something, not with my ears, but with my soul. It was a signal, faint yet undeniable, as if a voice deep inside was calling me by name. My name is Mateo Cruz, and before that day, I thought life was just a series of events you survive. I worked. I paid bills. I tried to fit in, but I never understood why my heart felt restless even when everything seemed fine. I did not know that restlessness was my inner frequency, the part of me God placed there to keep me from drowning in the ordinary. And that day, lying between life and death, I finally heard it loud and clear in that place. There were no crowds, no noise from the world, only truth. I understood that most people will live their whole lives without hearing their own inner signal. They will think it is nothing. They will ignore it. But God created each of us with a unique calling, a purpose that cannot be replaced. If we are too busy to notice it, we miss the moment that could change everything. Before the accident, I always believed that help would come. I thought maybe a mentor would guide me. Maybe a government program would open a door. Maybe a family member abroad would send enough money to lift me up. Deep inside, I kept waiting for someone else to move first, someone else to rescue me from the weight of my own decisions. But in that moment between life and death, I realized no one was coming. It was not a cruel message. It was a freeing one. In the vision, I saw myself standing at a crossroads. One road was crowded, filled with people waiting in lines, holding papers, looking at their phones, glancing around for someone to call their name. But no one ever came down that road to lead them away. The other road was empty, silent, and terrifying. There was no guide, no signs, only the path itself. And I knew in my heart this was the road I had to take if I wanted to live a life that mattered. When I woke up in the hospital, I thought about the Philippines. I thought about how often we as a people wait for a rescue. We wait for an election to fix our communities. We wait for an OFW relative to send something back. We wait for a boss to notice our hard work and give us a promotion. But the truth I saw was simple. Waiting is not hope. Waiting is surrender, disguised as patience. God gives us the ability to act, but He will not force our feet to move. Faith without works is dead. I remember lying in that hospital bed thinking about how many years I had wasted just sitting in the crowd, telling myself I was being wise to wait, when in reality I was afraid to choose. That fear was comfortable. It kept me from risk, but it also kept me from life. I saw the faces of people I knew, good people, hardworking, kind, and yet they stayed in the same place year after year because they believed someone else would decide for them. Someone else would open the door. Someone else would remove the barrier. But no one did, and no one ever will. I thought about my friend Isabel Ramos. Before my accident, she told me to slow down, to not take so many risks. She was worried I would fail. She thought she was protecting me. But in reality, her words were feeding my comfort zone. I cannot blame her, because I had the same mindset. I told myself, just wait until the timing is right. Just wait until the signs are clear. But the vision showed me that the signs are rarely clear, and the timing is never perfect. You either step forward now, or you stay forever where you are. I remembered the parable of the talents, how the servant who buried his gift out of fear lost everything. I realized I had been burying my own gifts, thinking I was keeping them safe until the right moment. But in truth, I was letting them rot under the soil of inaction. In the vision, I heard a whisper. It said, if you want to see the promised land, you have to leave Egypt yourself. The rescue we dream of is often a mirage. We imagine that someone will arrive to pull us from the flood. But the boat is already here. It is our own courage, our own willingness to take the first step. When Jesus called Peter to walk on water, He did not carry Peter out of the boat. Peter had to swing his own legs over the side and step. I understood in that moment that I had been sitting in my boat for too long, staring at the waves, praying for them to calm before I moved, not realizing that the miracle happens while the waves are still crashing. After my accident, even as I healed, I saw this truth everywhere. In the jeepney driver who had ideas for a small business but never tried because he was waiting for a perfect investor. In the young graduate who waited for the perfect job posting instead of building her own skills. In the church member who kept saying maybe next year when asked to serve in a ministry. All of them waiting for someone to make the first move on their behalf. I thought about how God gave Adam and Eve the garden but told them to tend it. He provided the land, the resources, the environment, but not the finished harvest. It was their responsibility to work the soil, plant, and reap in the same way God has given us the raw material of our lives, the talents, the ideas, the people around us. But He will not do the planting for us. No angel will come to file your business papers. No prophet will take your exam for you. No miracle will clean your room unless you get up and do it. When I accepted that no one was coming, I stopped feeling bitter toward others. I stopped blaming my parents for not giving me more. I stopped blaming my leaders for not seeing my potential. I stopped blaming my friends for not supporting me enough. Because the truth is, it was never their job. It was always mine. God gave me breath. He gave me strength. He gave me a mind. And if I waste those waiting for a human rescue, I am rejecting the very gifts He gave me. In that hospital room, I made a promise. I told myself that if I got another chance, I would not wait for permission. I would not sit still waiting for a call that might never come. I would move, even if my steps were small, even if my path was unclear, because I finally understood that waiting for rescue is the fastest way to drown, and choosing to act is the only way to swim. Even now, I can still see that vision, the crowded road filled with those who wait, and the empty road that leads into the unknown. I know which one I will take from now on. The narrow road, the one where you are both the traveler and the guide, the one where every step is a choice, and every choice is your responsibility. No one will take that step for you, and that is exactly why it matters so much. When I was recovering, I spent long hours staring at the ceiling, listening to the beeping machines, and thinking about the life I had lived before. I realized something that made me uncomfortable. Most of my frustration in the past had come from watching people settle for less than what they were capable of. And yet I had been doing the same thing without even noticing. In the Philippines, we have a phrase, pwede. It means this is good enough. It is the quiet surrender we accept when the food is cold, but we still eat it. When the road is broken, but we still drive on it. When our dreams shrink to match the space society allows us. I saw how often we wrap ourselves in pwede thinking it is contentment, when in truth it is resignation. We are not at peace. We are simply tired of fighting. In my vision during the NDE, I stood in a city built entirely of gray bricks. No color, no life. People were moving, but without purpose. Their eyes were dull. No one was crying. No one was laughing. They were just existing. I understood this city represented mediocrity, a place where nothing is truly wrong, but nothing is truly alive. And I felt an anger rise in me, not against the people, but against the comfort that had trapped them. That anger was not loud. It was not the rage of revenge. It was a sharp, clean fire inside. It was the kind of anger Jesus had when He overturned the tables in the temple, not because He hated the people there, but because He refused to watch the holy place become ordinary. I realized that my own life had been a temple I had allowed to be filled with clutter, distractions, and the approval of others. I thought about Elon Musk. How many times people told him electric cars would never succeed, or that private rockets were a fantasy. When the world said it cannot be done, he did not accept it. He turned that dismissal into fuel. That is the power of righteous anger. It transforms this is enough into why not more. It takes the insults and doubts thrown at you and uses them as bricks to build something higher. In my own story, I remembered the time I worked in a corporate office. I had ideas for how to improve our process, but my supervisor said it was too complicated. She told me to just stick to the manual. Pwede na, she said with a smile. I agreed. I stayed quiet. I kept doing what was expected. Months later, the company lost a big client because of the very problem my idea could have solved. That memory burned in me as I lay in that hospital bed. It was proof that silence in the face of mediocrity is not kindness. It is betrayal of potential. I saw mediocrity in our public transport, where jeepneys decades old still struggle up the same roads, in our classrooms where brilliant students memorize outdated lessons, in our neighborhoods where problems are patched instead of solved. We say at least it works, but we forget that at least is the enemy of at best. The vision showed me something shocking. In that gray city, there were tall doors with gold frames scattered everywhere, but people walked past them without even turning their heads. I asked why, and the answer came. Because they had stopped believing those doors would open. They stopped knocking. They accepted the streets they knew, rather than risk finding out what was behind a new door. I knew then that anger at mediocrity is the courage to knock again. Even when your knuckles are bleeding from past attempts, I began to understand that this kind of anger is a gift from God. It is not meant to make you bitter. It is meant to keep you from blending into the background. It is a holy dissatisfaction that whispers you were made for more than this. In Scripture, Paul wrote about pressing toward the mark, that pressing is not gentle. It requires force, energy, and refusal to stop. That is what anger at mediocrity feels like in the spirit. I thought of Isabel again. She once told me that being content is important, and I agree. But I realized contentment is only holy when it comes after you have done all you can, not before. If you settle before the work is complete, you are not being humble. You are abandoning the mission God gave you. Jesus did not stop halfway to the cross because it was good enough. He finished his race fully, and that is the example we are called to follow. As I regained strength, I felt this fire in my chest grow. It changed the way I saw even small things. If I saw a messy desk, I cleaned it completely. If I saw a plan that could be improved, I spoke up. I refused to let pwede touch my life again because I knew how easy it is for a small compromise to grow into a lifetime of wasted potential. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Mediocrity is not just an individual problem. It is a social sickness. It infects families, companies, and nations. It tells us to accept what we are given instead of building what we need. It tells us to be silent so we do not disturb the peace. But true peace is only possible when truth and excellence are present. Without them, peace is just quiet decay. That day in my hospital bed, I made another promise to myself. I would not be silent in the face of mediocrity. I would speak, act, and build, even if it meant being called difficult or unrealistic, because I would rather be remembered as someone who tried to open the door than as someone who walked past it without a glance. I would let that righteous anger drive me to demand more from myself and from the world around me. Mediocrity thrives where there is no one brave enough to say, this is not enough. I decided that from now on, I would be that voice. I would be that person who looks at the gray city and starts painting it in color, even if the first strokes are small, even if others laugh. Because the truth is, the world does not change when we accept its lowest standard. It changes when we refuse to let that standard define us. There was a time in my life when opportunity came knocking, and I let it pass. I still remember it clearly. I had been invited to join a small startup. The pay was uncertain, but the idea was powerful. A new way to connect farmers directly with markets. It could have changed lives, but I hesitated. I told myself I needed more time, more savings, more certainty. Within a year, someone else took the same idea and turned it into a thriving business. I watched from the sidelines as their vision grew, knowing I could have been part of it if I had simply stepped forward. During my NDE vision, I saw doors suspended in midair, some glowing bright, some dull and fading. I understood that the bright ones were opportunities alive right now. The fading ones were the ones people had ignored for too long, and once they turned gray, they could never be reopened. I saw myself standing in front of a door that was glowing so strongly it almost hurt to look at, but my hands stayed at my sides, my feet frozen, and just like that, the glow dimmed until the door vanished completely. The pain in my chest at that moment was worse than any injury. I realized that opportunities rarely announce themselves with certainty. They often disguise themselves as risks, problems, or even failures. In the Philippines, we are taught to be careful, to not take big steps until we are absolutely ready. But I saw in the vision that readiness is often an illusion. The train leaves whether or not you are at the station, and if you are not willing to jump on, even when your hands are shaking, you will be left behind watching the dust settle. I thought again of Elon Musk. How he stepped into industries where no one believed a newcomer could survive. He did not wait until rockets were cheap or electric cars were mainstream. He acted when the window was barely open, because he knew the wind would slam it shut fast. And if he missed that moment, the entire future would belong to someone else. That same principle applies to us. Whether we are launching a business, applying for a job, or starting a ministry, if you hesitate too long, the door will close. In my own story, I remembered another moment. After my accident, when I had only just begun walking again, a friend told me about a speaking event at a church youth conference. They needed someone last minute because their main guest had canceled. My first thought was, I am not ready. My body is still weak. My voice is not strong. But the memory of the fading doors in my vision pushed me. I said yes before my doubts could speak again. That one decision connected me to people who would later open more doors I never imagined. It proved to me that action creates momentum. Opportunity is like the rain. You cannot control when it comes, but you can choose to run outside and catch it, or hide indoors and watch it pass. I began to see that many people in our country miss their rain because they wait for the perfect storm. They wait for the clouds to be just right, for the wind to be calm, but by the time they step outside, the rain is gone and the ground is dry. In the vision, I asked God why He would allow opportunities to disappear if He wanted us to grow. The answer was quiet but clear. The disappearing doors are not punishment. They are part of the design. Because growth requires urgency. Without the pressure of time, we would never move. We would always tell ourselves later until our entire life became a series of laters. I thought of the biblical story of the 10 virgins. 5 were wise and kept their lamps ready. 5 were foolish and waited until the last moment. When the bridegroom came, it was too late for the foolish ones to prepare. The opportunity was there, but their delay shut them out. In the same way, many of us will find that the doors God opened for us have been closed simply because we waited too long to walk through them. From that moment, I decided I would no longer wait for everything to be clear before I acted. Clarity often comes after the step, not before it. I began training myself to say yes faster, to commit before fear had time to talk me out of it. That does not mean being reckless. It means recognizing the difference between legitimate preparation and fear disguised as wisdom. Even now, whenever I sense a new door, I remind myself of the empty frame in my vision where a glowing door once was. I do not want to feel that loss again. I do not want to look back and wonder what could have been. I would rather fail walking through a wrong door than succeed at standing still in front of the right one. Because standing still is not safety. It is slow death. I see it in the stories around me. The young man who had a chance to work abroad but delayed because he was scared to leave home. The woman who wanted to start a small shop but kept waiting for prices to drop. The student who had a scholarship offer but waited until the deadline passed because she could not decide. Each one believed there would be another chance. But some doors never open twice. The truth is, opportunity is not polite. It does not wait for you to feel ready. It arrives. It knocks softly. And then it moves on. If you are not there to open it, it will not apologize. It will simply find someone else who is, and that someone else will build the future you could have had. In that moment, you will realize the real cost of hesitation was not safety. It was losing the life you were meant to live. So now, when a door appears, even if my heart is racing, even if my voice shakes, I reach out and push it open because I know the pain of a missed door is heavier than the fear of walking through it. And I know that the life God intends for me will not be built by waiting. It will be built by moving forward, one door at a time. Before my accident, I often felt out of place. In school, I was the student who asked too many questions. In work, I was the employee who challenged the routine. People would laugh and say I was OA or too ambitious. They told me to relax, to just do what everyone else was doing. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me. I tried to fit in. I tried to lower my voice, to hide my ideas, to be normal. In the vision during my NDE, I found myself standing in a large hall filled with identical chairs. Every person sat in silence, staring straight ahead. No one moved. No one spoke. But I could feel a deep weight in the air. It was the weight of conformity. I saw a small door at the side of the hall. It was painted in bright colors, different from everything else in the room. My heart pulled me toward it. But when I stepped forward, I heard whispers, "Stay in your seat. Don't be foolish. That's not for you." And I realized those voices were the same ones I had heard all my life. The voices that wanted me to blend in. Not being normal is often treated as a curse in our culture. In the Philippines, many families want their children to take safe careers, follow the expected life steps, and not disturb the peace. We measure success by how closely someone follows the pattern. Go to school, get a job, marry, build a house, retire quietly. Anyone who steps outside that path is called reckless or strange. But in that vision, I saw clearly that the path of normal was not leading to life. It was leading to slow decay. God created each person with a unique design. The Bible says we are fearfully and wonderfully made. No two fingerprints are alike. Yet society trains us to erase those differences so we can fit into the same mold. In my own life, I realized I had been sanding down my edges to be more acceptable. But those edges were the very tools God gave me to fulfill my purpose. I thought about Elon Musk again, how his ideas often made people laugh or call him crazy. Sending humans to Mars, building electric cars when gas ruled the roads. These were not normal goals, and that was exactly why they mattered. If he had tried to be normal, those dreams would have died before they ever began. The same applies to us. Our not normal is the birthplace of the work we are called to do. When I returned from the hospital, I noticed how quickly people tried to put me back in a familiar box. Mateo, just focus on getting a safe job. Don't push yourself too hard. Don't talk about those big ideas yet. But I knew that if I listened, I would lose the fire that had been lit inside me. I decided I would no longer apologize for being different. I would let my difference be the proof that I was walking my God-given path. In the vision, I saw that small painted door again. I walked toward it despite the whispers. When I touched the handle, the room behind me faded away, and I stepped into a bright, open field filled with possibilities. I understood then that the door was always open, but only for those willing to look strange while walking toward it. Most will never leave their seat because they fear the judgment of the crowd more than they fear a life unlived. Being not normal means you will be misunderstood. You will lose some friendships. You will be called stubborn, but it also means you are free. You are free to follow the call God has placed in your heart. You are free to try things others are too afraid to try. You are free to fail and get up without needing the crowd's approval. Jesus himself was not normal. He ate with tax collectors, healed on the Sabbath, spoke to women no one else would speak to, and challenged the religious leaders of his time. If we claim to follow him, why should we expect to be normal in the world's eyes? I began to see my life as a testimony that the very things people told me to hide were the things God wanted me to use. My curiosity, my refusal to accept pwede, my hunger for more, these were not flaws. They were signals pointing me toward my mission, and I realized that every step I take away from the crowd is a step closer to the purpose He prepared for me. When you embrace being different, you stop wasting energy pretending. You stop living in the shadow of someone else's expectations. You start building a life that reflects the gifts and convictions God gave you, and you inspire others who are still hiding to step out into the light. I have learned that your difference is not meant to make you better than others. It is meant to make you useful in the unique corner of the world you are called to change. So now, when people say I am not normal, I smile. I thank them because I know it is true. I know it is the mark that I am not trapped in the hall of identical chairs anymore. I have walked through the painted door, and I will keep walking, even if it means walking alone for a while, because I would rather walk alone toward life than sit comfortably in a crowd that is going nowhere. Fear was with me from the moment I woke up in that hospital bed. The doctors told me my recovery would be long. Maybe I would never regain full strength. I could feel the fear rising like a shadow over my thoughts. It whispered to me every day, what if you never get back to where you were? But I remembered something from my vision, something that changed the way I saw that fear. Fear was not a wall. It was a compass. In the vision, I had seen a long bridge hanging over a deep canyon. The boards were shaking. The wind was fierce. Everything in me wanted to step back to the safety of the cliff. But there was a light on the other side of the bridge, and I felt God telling me, what you fear most is where you need to go. I realized then that the intensity of my fear was directly connected to the size of the growth waiting for me on the other side. Fear often comes when we are about to step out of our comfort zone. In the Philippines, we often avoid this. We choose the familiar road, even if it is broken. We keep the job we have mastered, even if it no longer challenges us. We stay silent in church, even if God has given us a message to share. We tell ourselves it is wisdom, but many times it is simply fear in disguise. And the more we obey it, the smaller our world becomes. I thought about Elon Musk risking all his money to keep Tesla and SpaceX alive. The fear of losing everything must have been overwhelming, but he acted anyway, not because he felt fearless, but because he knew the opportunity was worth the risk. That is when I understood. The goal is not to erase fear. The goal is to move forward while fear is still in the room. In my recovery, small fears were everywhere. The first time I walked without help, the first time I spoke in public again, the first time I invested in a project after my accident, my hands would shake, my voice would tremble. But every time I pushed through, something happened. The fear that once felt like a giant shrank until it was almost nothing, and what had been terrifying became routine. In the vision, I saw people building walls around themselves, each wall made from a fear they had obeyed. One wall from the fear of failure, another from the fear of judgment, another from the fear of loss, until they were trapped in a small square they called safety. but it was not safety. It was a prison. I knew then that the only way to break those walls was to walk straight toward the fear and refuse to let it decide for you. The Bible is full of stories where fear was the signal to act. David stood before Goliath with fear in his heart, but he stepped forward because he trusted God's calling more than his own comfort. Peter stepped out of the boat onto the water, even though the storm was raging. Esther approached the king, knowing she could lose her life. In each case, the fear was real, but it pointed to a moment that could change everything. And it did. I began to test this in my own life. When I felt fear about speaking up in a meeting, I took it as a sign that my words were important. When I felt fear about applying for a new opportunity, I treated it as proof that it could grow me. When I felt fear about making a change, I reminded myself that staying the same was not neutral. It was decay. Fear has a strange gift. It focuses your attention. It strips away distractions and shows you exactly where your limits are. And if you push past those limits, they move. Each time you face fear, your territory expands, and the things that once scared you lose their power. I realized that my accident had shown me the biggest fear of all, the fear of dying without ever having truly lived. And once I faced that, all the smaller fears lost their grip. In the hospital, I prayed, asking God why He had allowed me to face so much fear. The answer I felt was this: so you will learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to follow me in spite of it. I understood that as long as I was still breathing, fear would come again and again. But now I would treat it as a guide, not a master. Today, when fear whispers that something is too hard, too risky, too uncertain, I pause, I listen, and then I take a step toward it, because I know that on the other side of that fear is the life God has been preparing for me, the life I would never find if I stayed where it felt safe. Fear is my compass, and it will keep pointing me toward the places I am called to go. When I left the hospital, I carried more than just the scars on my body. I carried a new clarity, the understanding that no one could choose my path for me. If I wanted a different life, I had to choose it myself. Before the accident, I thought my future depended on who noticed me, who opened doors for me, who said yes to my requests. I did not see that by waiting for others to choose me, I was giving away the very power God had placed in my hands. In the vision I had during my NDE, I saw a long line of people waiting outside a gate, each one holding a piece of paper with their name on it. They stood there for hours, some for years, watching as others were called in, but most never were. They grew old in that line, still waiting for someone to speak their name. Then I saw a smaller path beside the gate, empty, leading around to an open door with no guard. It was the path of those who chose themselves. Few took it, but those who did were already inside, building something new before the line even moved. Choosing yourself is not pride. It is stewardship. God has entrusted you with gifts, with ideas, with a portion of time on this earth. He has not asked you to sit and wait for approval before using them. In Matthew 5, Jesus calls us the light of the world. He does not say to hide the light until someone invites us to shine. He says to put it on a stand so it gives light to everyone. That is what it means to choose yourself, to stop hiding the light until someone else decides it is time. I thought of Elon Musk once more, how he did not wait for the aerospace giants to invite him into their meetings. He built his own table, his own rockets, his own future. He chose himself, and by doing so, he forced the world to take notice. In our own lives, the scale may be smaller, but the principle is the same. Whether it is starting a small store, applying for a role you are not yet qualified for, or launching a community project, the moment you step forward without waiting for permission, you have already changed your story. In my recovery, I had moments where old habits tried to return. I would hesitate to send an idea to a client until I had asked 3 people for their opinion. I would wait for a friend to suggest a meeting instead of calling first. But then I would remember the people in that line outside the gate, their faces growing tired as they waited for something that might never come. And I would take the small path. I would send the email, make the call, step into the room without being asked. Choosing yourself does not mean ignoring wise counsel. It means you make the final decision to act even when the counsel is not unanimous. It means you take responsibility for the outcome instead of blaming the lack of opportunity. It means you accept that the door God opened for you may not have your name printed on it, but it is open just the same. And It is your choice to walk through. In the vision, I noticed something else. Those who chose themselves did not just enter the open door. They turned back and called to others, showing them the way, and some followed. That is the hidden gift of choosing yourself. It gives others permission to do the same. In a culture where many are taught to wait, your action becomes a signal that waiting is not the only option. The truth is, life is shaped by the decisions we make when no one is looking. If you wait to be chosen, you may spend your entire life standing still. But if you choose yourself, you will discover that every step creates new ground beneath your feet. The more you walk, the more you see. The more you see, the more you can build. And soon the path you are on will not just lead you to your destination. It will inspire others to step off the line and join you. I have learned that God will honor the one who moves in faith, even if the step is small, even if the path is uncertain. He can redirect a moving ship, but he cannot steer one that is anchored in fear. So now, every time I face a choice, I ask myself, am I waiting for someone else to choose me, or am I willing to choose myself? If the answer is the first, I step forward until it becomes the second. Choosing yourself is not a single moment. It is a daily practice. It is waking up and deciding again and again to act on the purpose God has given you, without apology, without delay, without waiting for the perfect sign. Because the truth is, the sign you are looking for is already here. You are still breathing, and that means it is still your time to move. If you have felt even one moment in this story stir something inside you, do not let it fade. This is not just another video you scroll past. This is your signal, your reminder that life is too short to wait, too precious to waste. You have heard my journey. You have seen the doors, the fears, the choices. Now it is your turn. Right now, you can start small. You can take one step toward the life God has been calling you to live. Do not wait until tomorrow, because tomorrow is never promised. Decide today. Decide now. Choose yourself. Act before the moment closes. And if you are ready, I want you to show it. Type I am ready in the comments so the world knows you are part of the 1% who will act. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next message that could push you further. And share this with someone you know is still waiting in that long line. Because we are not here to watch life pass by. We are here to step into it together.